So most of our attendees are still filtering in, but I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Jeff Collins, and I'd like to officially kick off NARE's first in-person conference since the pandemic. We're back. And also to welcome you all to the 55th annual conference of NARE. And even during the pandemic, we managed to meet virtually. Today, we're going to start with our full program, 3 full days of meetings and press conferences and news-generating events. Hope you all have notebooks and laptops and are ready to report. We're going to start with NARE University, which is our, we have a full schedule of education courses for all of us. And then this evening, at the end of a very full day, we have a great reception up on the 16th floor pool deck. And we're going to gather and greet, and then we're going to haul ass out to the buses and get ready for a tour tonight of the Wynwood Arts District. The Arts District, I don't know a lot about it, other than I've been there and it's beautiful. But I'm told that it's sort of an industrial area with lots of graffiti and rundown buildings, but art sort of like was the theme that brought this industrial district back and made it the thriving district it is today. We'll have tour guides from Gensler, the largest architectural firm in the United States, or in the world. I have put a green dot on my name tag. I have a green arm bag. So we have a choice of green, yellow, red, and green is for fist bumps and if Mary's not looking, hugs. Yellow is a little bit more cautious, and red is keep your distance, buddy. So remember to put your tags on. So with no further ado, we're going to start off with NARE University, and I'm going to turn it over to NARE Vice President Eileen Woods.
Good morning. Good morning. It's so nice to see everybody in person. Welcome. 61 million adults in the United States are living with a disability. Roughly 12 million people 40 years or older in the United States have vision impairment, including 1 million people who are blind. 10.8% of Americans have cognition problems, such as difficulty remembering, making decisions, or concentrating. And 4.9% have deafness or serious difficulty hearing. In an age in which we communicate with one another in fractions of a second, researchers have found that people are lonelier than ever, especially during this time of COVID. Despite social media accounts like Twitter and Snapchat and Facebook and the like, the knowledge gap between those who are in the know and who aren't is widening. How we present the news from the formats we choose, how we name our photos, to the words we use in hyperlinks can be the deciding factors between whether or not the disabled have access to the information they need to know. 1 in 4 people has a disability. They are the missing 25%. It is my honor to introduce Patrick Garvin, whom I've had the privilege of working with at the Boston Globe, where Mr. Garvin left a legacy of innovation, gorgeous and informative print pages, and groundbreaking multimedia presentations. Patrick, in addition to being a stand-up comedian and a stand-up guy, is a front-end developer, an adjunct professor in multimedia journalism at the University of Missouri at Columbia, and a web accessibility consultant. He resides in his hometown of St. Louis, but swears he is a fan of the New England Patriots. I'm not sure I completely believe him, but I do believe he can help us bridge the communication gap we have with the disabled. Welcome, Patrick.
Well, thank you. I don't know how to follow that. I would try to make some sort of Patriots reference, but I don't want to make the wrong reference. But I would say that I aim to be the Tom Brady of accessibility, but then that might turn off like 90% of you from accessibility, in which case I could be the Gronk of accessibility, I don't know. So thank you all for being here. The Bitly link has a link to the Google Slides in case anyone wants to follow along. Otherwise, you'll be able to get access to those slides after the presentation, and throughout the presentation I'll have links for resources and whatnot. So what we're going to go over today is we're going to review what accessibility is, give examples of things that we can all start doing immediately that can make our work more accessible to people with disabilities. We'll give longer-term advice on how you can build a culture of accessibility, and then we'll review some resources on best practices and how to dig in more to resources and how to teach yourself as you go. So, as Eileen said, I spent 9 years at the Globe, 15 years in the newsroom. I also teach at Mizzou's School of Journalism, and I'm certified with the International Association with Accessibility Professionals, and I've been doing this for 1.5 years, and it stemmed from watching how my parents struggled during the beginning stages of quarantine, that they struggled being able to use the web to do things that they would normally do in person. And that was kind of when I had my aha moment about this being the next stage of my career. So here's what I'm guessing of all of you today is that some of you have some knowledge of accessibility, and that's great. Some of you might have less knowledge of accessibility than others. That's also okay. And some of you are just excited to learn, and that's definitely okay. So we're going to define what accessibility is. The World Wide Web Consortium, think of them as kind of like the Jedi Council of the World Wide Web. They oversee the standards of what makes valid code, and they have just defined accessibility as web accessibility means that websites, tools, and technologies are designed and developed so that people with disabilities can use them. That seems very straightforward and very obvious, and you would think that there would be built-in things that would make things accessible by default, and in some ways there are, and in some ways it's still easy to insert and add a barrier even if you don't know. But that's why we're here. So accessibility is often shortened to A11Y. That's a numeron that is a placeholder, where the 11 is a placeholder for the 11 letters between A and Y in accessibility. So in some of the resources that I share, you'll see that. So I just wanted to give you a sense of that. Good question that people often ask is where to start in the accessibility efforts, and I often tell them to start with alternative text for their images. If you start with that, you'll be better than a lot of news outlets. So what alt text is, it is literally alternative text that is the stand-in for images that people cannot see. So quite often, you would maybe notice it if you're maybe on a bus or a train and you don't have Wi-Fi, or your data is kind of, your data plan isn't necessarily working. The picture might not load, and you'll see the green broken image button, but there would be that text that explains what the image is. That's alt text, and that's a great reason to have alt text, in addition to the people who are not sighted, who would depend on alt text in any and every instance. And it is text that describes literally what is in the image and gives them the context of what they need to know. So we're going to watch a demonstration on how to add alt text on Twitter.
So here we are on Twitter.
And I'm going to show how to add alt text to images when we tweet them so that people who use screen readers can understand the same content that sighted users would be able to get on Twitter. So I'm going to select the button or click the button. And I'm going to select this media icon. I'm going to select an image that I have from my downloads folder. And I have two options. I can click edit here, or I can select add description. I am going to click add description. And I am taken to this pop-up modal window that has my photo, and it has a box here called description, and it tells me that I have typed 0 of 1,000 characters. And so I have up to 1,000 characters. Hopefully we will only need a fraction of that. So I'm going to start typing some text to describe this image, to describe it for someone who won't be able to see this photo. And that could be someone who is blind, someone who has low vision. That could also be someone who is maybe using a device without Wi-Fi and is having trouble loading images. So it could be a sighted user who is not able to see the images at that point in time because of Wi-Fi and connection reasons. So we're going to describe this image in a way that anyone who cannot see it can know and have the same context as everyone else who is sighted. So we're going to describe this as a fall day on the University of Missouri Francis Quadrangle. The 6 columns are visible with Jesse Hall behind them. Trees with little to no leaves can be seen on either side of the columns of the quadrangle. People are on the quad playing games or just otherwise hanging out. The sky is a pretty blue. I think that works. I'm going to click save. And I can see now this Alt button where I can click on it and it will let me read and review my text. But when you look at this tweet, you won't be able to see that Alt button. The only person who can see that Alt button is the person the person who has the account on which the image is being tweeted. So I'm going to type, "What a beautiful day on Mizzou's campus today." Or I might say this afternoon. All right. So now I can view the tweet. And that alt text, but that alt text is only going to show up to me. So how is this going to be usable to someone who's using a screen reader? How is this going to be usable to someone who is blind?
I'll show you. If you have Chrome, you can get a screen reader extension. I already have it, but I'm going to just Google it to show you what it would look like. So if you go to the Chrome Web Store and look for it, this is what it would look like. I already have it here because I've already downloaded it. So it gives me the option to remove from Chrome. If you don't have it, this would be the place where you would download it. So,
ChromeVox spoken feedback is ready.
So I'm now going
ChromeVox spoken feedback. What a beautiful day on Mizzou campus this afternoon. Patrick M. Garvin. What a beautiful day on entered dialogue. A fall day on the University of Missouri's Francis Quadrangle. The 6 columns are visible with Jesse Hall behind them. Trees with little to no leaves can be seen on either side of the columns and the quadrangle. People are on the quad, playing games or just otherwise hanging out. The sky is a pretty blue. Dialogue 1.
So if I had not added that alt text to that image, it would have just said image. So you can use that screen reader to look at any kind of site. So we're going to look at the site for the NAREE.
NAREE visited link. Navigation list with 8 items. List item has pop-up. NAREE events, internal link. List item has pop-up. Awards, internal link.
So what I'm doing is I'm simply hitting the tab
list
key.
List item has pop-up. Link.
And so the tab key is how someone who uses a keyboard, whether they have a screen reader or not, it's how they can get to anything that is clickable or act upon a button or a link.
Find out. Register now. Link. More info. Link. Less than in src equal quote https://images.squarespace-cdn.com/content/v1/5050997C1E4B05309302846591-1-1KB7J0VOZXYQ555LE701/smart plus social plus media plus post.png quote alt equal quote smart social media post.png quote / greater than smart social media post.png link.
That was a mouthful. And that is what someone who is using a screen reader would hear when navigating the site.
More info. Link. Less than in src equal quote https://images.squarespace-cdn.com/ more info. Link. Jeff Collins mug-2020-jg-crop. Annual conference. NAREE visited link.
Right. So this is what this experience is like on a screen reader. We'll go back to the presentation now to talk more about screen readers and alt text and how to make those as efficient as possible for people who use them. So we're back from Twitter, and we have just had that journey of how the screen readers work, and it is not necessarily something that we, who are sighted users who've never used a screen reader, it's not necessarily something that's going to feel 100% intuitive, but that's okay. Lots of questions about alt text and the nature of alt text and what's the best way to write it, and so we're going to jump into that. A lot of times there's a question about what's the difference between alt text and a caption, and that's a great question. Basically, the caption is specifically in the context of journalism is used as a supplement to the image and the information in the image. So the caption might tell you the name of the people in the photo, where it was taken, the day of the photo, but it also might include things that you cannot get from the image. So it might, if it's an image of the Patriots-Bills game from last night, it might indicate that they're fans, but it might also, the caption might also say the score, how well the teams have done against each other in the past, all sorts of things that you would have no way of gleaning from the image alone. Or it might have, if it was a picture of someone getting a vaccine, it might include COVID stats, might include vaccine stats, things that you'd have no way of gleaning from the literal image. Alt text is instead about what is literally actually in the image. So traditionally the news caption does not tell you that stuff because it was never meant to. And the news caption is not meant to stand in place for the photo. If we had a news site that was full of captions but no photos, you would not get the same information. The traditional news caption was never meant to stand in for a photo. It was always meant to augment it, to go in tandem with it, whereas alt text, is for people who will have no way of getting the image. They need to know what's in the image to have the same context as everyone else. So the alt text would be a stand-in or a replacement for the people who cannot get the image. The caption is supplement to the image. And so they shouldn't be written the same, or they could be written the same, but you'd just be repeating yourself, I suppose. One piece of advice that I got early on that I've repeated is if you can close your eyes and have someone read your alt text to you that you've written, and you can get a good sense of what it is, you're on the right track. Or if you do that process with a coworker or a partner or a family member, like, hey, close your eyes and let me read this to you. And then do you have a good sense of what that is? And if they do or don't, you can kind of tweak what you've written based on that. Question that you might have is, when you're writing it, do I need to say that this is an image of this, or is this a picture of this? No. The prevailing wisdom is that because most screen readers being the software, the technology that is reading the content from the images and reading the content from the website, that the name of that type of software is screen reading software, so it's often shortened to being referred to as just screen readers. Screen readers in context will already know that it's an image or a picture because of how the website is coded. It will be, not to get too technical or jargony, but it will be coded in something that's an image tag that lets it know that it's an image, so you don't have to say that. That being said, there can be times when describing the nature of the image will help give you context. So if this is a hand-drawn map, that is helpful for me to know versus if it is a satellite image, or if it is something that someone made in Photoshop or Illustrator. If it's a Polaroid picture, sometimes if you've got a feature story that has old family photos, seeing that it's a Polaroid adds a certain feel to the context that gives a certain vibe to it than if you just say a picture of Eileen Woods from 1989 versus if like a Polaroid and you can describe like parts of it are faded, that gives it a certain context. Or if like black and white photos, not to put you on the spot, from 1989. If it's a scanned image, if it's an older weathered photo, if it's a
infographic, if it's a screenshot, the context, the type of the image, that would be really helpful. So alt text is important. What else should we be thinking about in our work? Hashtags. So in this screen, we have 3 variations of the phrase, "we are accessible." I don't know if anyone actually ever uses this hashtag, but I picked it because it demonstrates something that can be difficult. For sighted users, you may have seen that WEAR had first been tempted to think that it was saying wear, like as in wearing something. Not only are you going to think that, the screen reader is going to think that too. The screen reader is going to try to turn this into a word. But having the capital letters in each word lets the screen reader know we've gone from one word to the next. Don't try to make this all one word. Because that top one, it's going to try to say very accessible, or it's going to say something. Whereas if you use camel case, which is the middle one, camel case is when every word except the first word is capitalized, but the first word is lowercase. Pascal case is the third one where all the words are capital. Doesn't really matter, it's just that both of them are much more accessible to screen reader users, but I also think for sighted users it helps you break up the content a lot easier, and because both screen readers and sighted users will think of it as gibberish otherwise. And all these slides are available on that bit.ly link, which I'll share at the end of the presentation, and there are links on each of these slides so that if you decide later that you want to go in at your own pace, you can go through these links to get more information. Don't use click here in any link text. As you may have noticed when we were tabbing through the website, and when you tab through the website, you can tab through the website whether you've got a screen reader on or not on. It'll just be tabbing from any button or link that someone can click on. But for the screen reader user, tabbing through a site is the equivalent of the way that a sighted user would just scan through the site. So anytime we open a web page, we don't immediately start reading from the top left and read everything on it all the way to the bottom part. And I've never met anyone who does that. I certainly don't do that. When I click on anything from the New York Times or the Washington Post or even the Globe, where I worked for 9 years, I'm not going to read every single word on the page because that's just not how sighted people use content. We will scan, get a sense if it has the information that we need or want or expect, and if we are interested, then we'll find where we need to start and then read. People who are using screen readers will also tab through to see what's on the page, what the furniture is, what the navigation is, and so links are going to help them get a sense of, am I in the right place? So links are going to be, when they're tabbing through it, they're going to hear the link content out of context. So if you just have 10 click here's, you're going to get 10 click here's in a row, and they're not going to have the context to know what they're getting. Also, many people will not be clicking, but they'll be tapping or using keyboards, or some people will use touch screen, some people will use speech devices for people who have a mobility disability. Some people will use mouth wands or head sticks to tap, so that they are not necessarily going to be clicking. And it gives no concrete information of where they're going. So the best way to do it is to write link text that doesn't depend on what comes before or after, and that you don't want anyone to have to guess what plain language. Plain language is language that a user can understand the first time they read or hear it. The Plain Writing Act of 2010 defines plain language as writing that is clear, concise, well-organized, follows other best practices appropriate to the subject or field or intended audience. So that does not mean dumbing down information, leaving out important parts, avoiding complex topics, baby talk or being cutesy or folksy. Does not mean stripping out the technical, legal information. Does not mean just polishing at the end. It certainly, does not mean polishing at the end, and it certainly doesn't mean being imprecise. What it does mean is presenting something in a clear, straightforward way so that users can find what they need, understand what they find, and then use that information to act upon so that they can use the information for the purpose that they were seeking out in the first place. So if someone's coming to your website for COVID stats, maybe presenting it in a county-by-county table as opposed to paragraphs for here's what Barnstable County did, here's what Middlesex County did. Sometimes just having things in a table will make sense. It's basically effective barrier-free communication. So it doesn't necessarily mean having to simplify it, and because sometimes plain writing is actually longer, but it's just writing it in a way that anyone can get it the first time they hear or read it. All right, so what are some things that we can consider in the longer term? The very first thing that I tell everyone, create an accessibility chat, whether you're using Teams or Slack or whatever your organization's internal program is that you're using. Start a channel there where you can be sharing content or sharing resources as you're learning about it, asking questions, asking people to review what you've been doing. It puts it on people's radar. It helps people feel okay to ask questions. It helps people realize that we're all learning and growing in this, so that if they feel like other people have questions, they will be willing to ask questions too. And it fosters discussions, and it becomes a great way to share information as you learn. Lenny Feingold, an accessibility advocate and lawyer, has said that some people will need to know a lot, but everyone will need to know a little. So you don't need to have a newsroom or organization full of experts. You just have to have people made aware of how their work can affect people. So you don't have to have expertise where you know every single thing. You just have to have people that are interested in making things accessible, because that interest is going to be enough to help you ask the questions to get to the answer. Pose accessibility questions early and often. Some of your questions that you have in meetings can be answered right then and there in the meeting. Other times, no one in the meeting will have the answer, but that's going to be okay, because it can become a learning experience. You can deputize someone and say, hey, Eileen, you look this up, Patrick, you look this up, and then at the next meeting, you've got a nice show and tell where you can discuss what you learned. Accessibility is not a bolt-on at the end. It's a process. An analogy that I stole from Cordelia of the 13 Letters podcast is to treat accessibility like blueberry muffins. You can't just bake muffins and then add the blueberries after they've already come out of the oven, because what you're going to end up with is not blueberry muffins. If you're trying to mash blueberries into muffins that are already baked, you're not going to have blueberry muffins. You're just going to have a mess. But what you think is blueberry muffins is going to be, similarly, you cannot have accessible websites if you try to add accessibility at the end. We need to think of accessibility as not so much about code and technical things, but also in the context of diversity. Yes, there are code and technical aspects. You will need to have your developers and designers do things that your reporters and editors and producers aren't doing. The idea is not that everybody has to learn technical stuff that's not part of their job. That's not it at all. The idea is to have people thinking about it in terms of how can we be better serving and reaching communities that we might not have been otherwise. 1 in 7 people in the world have a disability. As Elaine pointed out, 1 in 4 adults in the U.S. have a disability, and the statistics vary from country to country, in part because there's still stigma around it. So the way that certain places will report it will vary, but this is not, the numbers are not negligible. And if we can understand disability in terms of other areas of diversity, it can help us come up with our approach, but also with stories, because there's a lot at the intersection of poverty, educational opportunities, job opportunities, weak enforcement of anti-discrimination laws, specifically the ADA here in the States. And then there's all sorts of other issues. Familiarize yourself with physical disability concepts. There's a lot of real estate deals with, real estate does deal with the physical, not just a lot of real estate in the physical world. Much of the physical world is still very much inaccessible. Many buildings will treat accessibility as a bolt-on at the end. Cafes in 2020, because of COVID, added outdoor tables, and that made things great for social distancing. Made it horrible for people who have guide dogs, wheelchairs, canes, and need to navigate the sidewalk. Many buildings can't accommodate multiple wheelchair users at the same time. Many playgrounds are not designed with accessibility in mind, including for families with children on the autism spectrum. If there is not a clearly defined fence around the entire perimeter, they will not be able to use it. But unless you are aware of that, it's not going to be something that many people are aware of. So familiarizing yourself with those concepts will help you with your reporting and your projects as well. Rethink the language and frame of reference. A lot of our language uses terms that will even unintentionally paint people as being other or less than. Special needs aren't special. It's just it's different needs, but it's not special to need to be in a place where you can thrive. A family wanting a house with a theater, that is a special need. But wanting to live in a house that doesn't have barriers for someone using a wheelchair, that's not a special need. Nor is needing to live in a school district that has good special education resources. Being willing to make mistakes and keep going. An accessibility speaker and consultant, Sherry Byrne-Haber, has pointed out that our first attempts at accessibility will not be perfect. Actually, the term she uses is awful, but I've cleansed to that because I don't think that they're going to be awful. They're just not going to, we all start off at a basic junior level understanding. No one starts a new skill at the expert level. And as Sherry said, even people with disabilities can't represent the needs of everyone with every disability. I have a bunch of resources in the slide deck that you can, if you go to the slide deck on Google Slides, you can get all of these. I've got some general accessibility links, some resources to dig into the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, some resources about color contrast, some resources about color blindness, some resources about data visualization, some good people to follow on Twitter, including I've created an accessibility voices list that has about 100 people within the accessibility space that have a lot of good food for thought. And then the A1Y hashtag. I've linked to previous presentations, and then I also have, you've got my Twitter info, my email, and you've got the link to the slides for this. Now, I'm an earnest Midwesterner, so I would not offer anything if I wasn't serious about anyone taking me up on it. So if you do have questions, feel free to reach out. And so apologies, I did go over a few minutes, but I think we've got time for questions.
Good. I have some questions for you, Patrick.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, not only making your websites accessible for the disabled is a considerate thing to do. From a business standpoint, when we're fighting with so many other news outlets out there, from, we're legacy media, we're working with, there are news sites out there that have information that might not be solid and so forth. Is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is important, and yet there's going to be a temptation that because we associate search engines and keywords, some people will be tempted to just stuff alt text full of keywords. And so there could be a temptation to just write Starbucks, Frappuccino, Mocha Explosion, Peppermint Latte, and just all of these terms that's going to just sound like a Mad Libs of Starbucks products. And that's not going to help anyone know what's in the image, unless quite literally it's like a row of all their products like lined up for whatever reason. But if you're just throwing in keywords, it's not going to help anyone like New England Patriots, football, Gillette. And you're like, well, what am I actually looking at? Is it Gillette Stadium? And then you find out, no, it's just a picture of a player. Like, well, then why do I need to? But what's good about alt text and SEO is that what SEO does is a kind of what search engine optimization is good for is that it helps computers, to the best of their limited abilities, understand what about a website an actual human is going to want to know. And when you're writing alt text so that an actual human can know what's in there, you're probably going to hit on the search terms that people are going to need to know. So if you have an image that describes that, especially if you have an image that has text in it, whether it's a chart or if it's phone numbers for community resource centers, like that stuff is going to be something that's useful for the search engine to have, and it gets associated with that page. And there's just that much more information that gets associated with the page that will drive people back to the page.
I don't want to take up the few minutes that we have left without taking questions from the audience. Does anybody have a question? Jeff?
So obviously you've given us a lot of great information. We have to go back to our own publications and try and convince them. Did your links include any articles for how to get started, why to use this, or?
Let me repeat the question. Jeff asked when we go back to our newsrooms whether Patrick has included links for with information about how you can get the ball rolling.
Yes. There's, in the general accessibility links, there are a couple links about various things, and then there's a great link in there called Giving a Damn About Accessibility, and that is by Sherry Byrne-Haber, one of the people that I quoted, and she has it's an ebook that she also has had converted to audio, and in the ebook there's like illustrations in there that almost look like they're from like Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, and she talks about the type of barriers that you'll find in terms of people, like the person who wants you to justify the business costs, the person who wants to second guess, well, does someone with a disability really need this, the person who I think she goes through like 10 different personas of people that you might bump up against in your organization who would challenge you, and then how to either convince them, or if their perspective is toxic, how to keep them at bay. And there's a lot of good, there's a good resource in there from Meryl Evans about things that writers and editors can start doing. She has a lot about link text, she has a lot about social media, and that's going to be a great thing that you can share with people, because I think that having easy wins at the beginning will help people keep going, because it's kind of like, it's like when you first start anything, whether it's exercising or knitting or whatever, if you don't see any kind of payoff at the beginning, you can feel like, well, I'm just no good at this and I'm not going to keep going. So I always have to start with those easy wins. And so there's the general accessibility links in there. There's one from Lirio Designs. I think it's like 10 things that you can do with social media in your website now. And then Meryl Evans has, and there's a couple links like that have those easy wins, things that you can share. And that will be a great way in your organization, because someone can look at that, and at the end of reading that, they'll already have things that they can start doing.
Yeah, we don't have people like that in the newsroom at all, and people that say we don't have the money or we don't have the time, and do we really need this?
So with that, one of the things that I hammer home is that if you took any other area of diversity or marginalized communities and tried to justify the exclusion that we do with accessibility of people with disabilities, a lot of people will say, well, our tweet scheduler doesn't allow us to add alt text, or our CMS doesn't allow us to add alt text. If your CMS didn't allow you to use they, them pronouns, or to capitalize Black or African American, or it forced you to do other things that people had told you are considered microaggressions against their community, your CMS would be out. And so I get that there are a lot of limitations that people have, but I think, when I hear someone say, well, that's great, but in an ideal world, It's like, well, in an ideal world, wouldn't we be working towards that ideal world rather than just clutching our pearls and going to our fainting chair saying, there's nothing we can do? There is some stuff we can do.